Wayward Magic, Chapter 3, Tam's First Time. The next 3 days are quiet, uneventful traveling. We pass the little villages outside of Tam's family farm, and we travel far enough for proper dirt roads to become little more than trails, some narrow enough to require us to ride our horses single file. My first fear is that Tam would be unsuited to rough travel, sleeping on the ground, eating sparse meals, riding for hours on end. But if she aches or struggles or stresses, she never lets on. After the first evening of endless questions, she settles in, riding quietly alongside me most times. On the third day, as we ride side by side past a particular-looking copse of trees, Tam slows her horse, looking around. Quietly she says, "This is the furthest I have ever traveled in my entire life." Then she takes a breath, exhales, swishes her reins, and continues on. We managed to avoid running into anyone else during those 3 days. No travelers, peddlers, or wanderers. No one. Until the evening of that third day. We've just settled in, finding a small quiet clearing with soft grass and level ground, enough space for our bedrolls and a small fire. We still have a few hours before sunset, and Tam is off in the woods taking care of her necessary. That's her term for it, anyway. And again, if she has any issues with having to pee in the bushes, she's kept it to herself. Our horses are tethered a short distance away, further over by the trees. I'm tending the fire, keeping it just big enough to heat the meat that I have spitted above the flames. That's when I hear them. There's a pair of them, heavy footsteps, so I'm thinking men. Trying to be stealthy, but failing miserably. And the fact that they're trying to sneak is a bad sign. If it was someone like us, simply traveling along, headed from point A to point B, they wouldn't be sneaking through the woods. But as clumsily as they're moving, they aren't trained. They're common thugs, not members of the Emperor's Guard. I figure the best thing I can do now is draw them over to me. I stand up, brush off my hands, and call out, "I can hear you, you know. You might as well come out." Seconds later, a tall man comes out through the trees. He's poorly dressed and smiling way too big. "Evening, missus. I saw your nice little fire here, and I thought—" I stare him down. "You thought incorrectly." His smile fades. "Well, now, that's not very neighborly. What happened to friendly hospitality?" I sweep the left side of my black cloak back, revealing the short sword I'd stolen from the guard not so long ago. "I'm going to have to ask you and your friend to leave." "I see." He gives me the tiniest of smirks. "But what about your friend?" And that's when I hear a muffled voice. Tam is being dragged through the clearing by the other thug, a shorter one. He comes in the clearing from the opposite direction as his friend. Apparently, that was their plan. One of them sneaks up on me, the other takes care of Tam. He's holding her from behind, one arm around her tight, pinning her right arm down. And in his left hand, he's got a knife, which he's holding to Tam's throat. He must have snuck up behind her in the woods. Now I have to change how I play this. Above all else, I have to keep Tam alive. I move back slightly so I can keep both guys in view at the same time. I raise my hand slowly in the air and say, "We mean you no harm." The taller one tilts his head. "Oh, listen to this one. A second ago it was please leave. You were going to throw us out into the cold. Let us starve. Now it's we mean you no harm." He clicks his tongue. "Boy, women, I tells ya." The shorter one ignores all that and looks right at me. "Look, see. Found your little dark-skinned bitch wandering around. Not all that hard, seeing as how she was fouling up the forest with her stink. Smells worse than the horses, she does." I sigh inwardly, but keep my expression level. Nice to see that racism is alive and well in this place, too. "She started to fight back," the thug said, "but thought better of it when she saw my knife. Now, if you two simply give us what we want, we might let you live." I keep my hands up, best to appear non-threatening for now. "And what is it you want?" The shorter one leers. "Depends. Show us what you got. Start by taking off that black cloak of yours. You're a tiny thing and you're dressed like a man, but I bet you got some curves on you." And now I have to work hard to suppress a groan. "Seriously? It's like that? And here I thought you two were simple bandits." The shorter one shrugs. "We're a lot of things. Oh, don't get me wrong, we're still going to rob you. We'll take whatever money and goods you have, but we might take a lot more from you before we're done. I might even take the dark skin here for a roll. Ain't never had a burnt chally before." And now Tam's eyes darken and she speaks up for the first time since all this began. "Do not ever call me that, and you will never." He pulls her threateningly tighter and presses the knife right to her throat. "I'll call you whatever I want, and will do whatever I want, Charlie, to you and your little friend in black, and if you try to fight back, well then, all's the better. I can do it to you breathing, or dead, although I do prefer breathing." I blink at that one. Okay, first off, ew. "She is a knight," Tam blurts. "Raven is a knight of Krell, and if you dare to—" The shorter one interrupts her with a hard laugh. "A knight! A female knight! Ain't no such thing, never was." The taller one shrugs. "Well, she is wearing a sword. Maybe she's playing at being a knight. You know, now that I think, I always wanted a sword. Don't currently have a sword. Heck, I ain't got no weapon at all." I narrow my eyes, and for the first time I focus more on the tall guy than the shorter guy with the knife. He's right. His hands are empty and there's no telltale bulge under his clothing to indicate he's got something tucked away. Besides, if he was armed, he'd already have it out, and he'd be threatening me with it. "Really? But—" I nod over to the shorter one. "He's got a knife. Why don't you have a knife?" The taller one shrugs. "What can I say? We've only got the one knife between us, and it's his turn." Then he smiles, smug and dirty. "Except now I'll have that sword, and the cloak, and everything that's underneath it." "Unless the lady knight runs you through," the shorter one scoffs. "But if she even thinks of trying, this dark skin's gonna do a lot of bleeding." "No," I say quietly. "The short one's on edge. I have to get him to relax a little before he does something foolish and hurts Tam." And then I change up my plan and look directly at Tam. "Listen, I'm not actually a knight. That was just a story. The sword, I stole it. And the cloak is—" Meanwhile, in my head, I'm thinking over and over, Throw him off, Tam. Do it like you did that boy in the hayloft. If you don't, this man will hurt you badly. He'll kill you." "Well," the shorter one says to me, "a stolen sword is no good for you then. Might as well hand it over to my friend there." Slowly, I let my hands drop to my shoulders and unfasten the cloak. I let it fall to the dirt. "I will. I'll do whatever you ask. Just let the girl go. She's only a child." Now the tall one smirks. "Well, she don't look like a child. She looks as grown as you. Besides, what if she is? Won't be the first bit of young play I've had." Now I stare at him openly and sigh. "Okay, you're making it real easy to hate you right now." "Shut it, harlot," the short one snaps. "Hand him the sword." Slowly, carefully, I unfasten my belt and hand everything over to the tall one. Belt, sword, scabbard, everything. "Oh, it's a nice one," the tall one says. "I know," I think to myself. "Why do you think I stole it?" And yes, it's nothing fancy, but it's well made and short enough to be comfortably drawn by someone my size. "And now," the shorter bandit says with a leer, "take off the rest as well. Tunic, pants, everything." I move my hand slowly down and pause. I can't take off much more, because if I so much as lift the hem of my tunic, they'll see the knife belt strapped across my abdomen. In that momentary pause, I look at Tam and try again. "Throw him! Throw him! Use your magic! Do it! Do it now!" Tam surprises me by looking at me and uttering a harsh, "I cannot!" The short one frowns, thinking Tam is responding to him. "Ain't no one talking to you, Darkskin. I ain't asked to see your chally, just hers." I hear the sound of metal clearing leather and turn my focus back to the tall one, who now has my sword drawn. Well, my sword. I mean, yes, okay, I stole it, but the guy I took it from did try to kill me, so I totally earned the right to claim his sword. It's mine now. The tall one grins. "You know what? Just go ahead and kill the Darkskin now. It'll make us easier for us to take turns on this one." And I can see in his eyes that he means it. "Wait!" I cry, spinning back to the short one with what I hope looks like desperation in my eyes. To Tam, I think, "Be ready." "Just wait," I say again, and I distract him by untying the front of my pants and smiling. "I can be cooperative. Watch." And then I turn back to the tall one, keeping my smile. "Thank you, by the way." He gives me a confused smirk. "Thanks, for what?" "For drawing my sword," I say. "Because now, you're no longer unarmed." And with that, both of my hands flash, each drawing a small thin throwing knife from the small of my back and flying forward, one high, one low. This scum, the guy who was ready to rape and murder us for pleasure, now has two of my knives sticking from him, one in his throat, one just below the rib cage. Even without armor to deflect the knives, I knew better than to try and pierce his ribs. It happens in less time than it takes for him to suck in a breath. I spin around to face the short one, another knife up and ready, but I hold on to it. I won't need it. The short one, now seeing me as the only threat, makes a mistake. He moves the knife away from Tam's throat and points it at me. In that instant, Tam uses her one free arm to grab the man's hand and bring it up to her mouth. She bites down hard enough to draw blood. The man screams and loosens his grip both on the knife and Tam. Tam yanks the knife out of his hand, and in one swift move, with no hesitation, she swings out, then drives the knife back hard into the shorter man's stomach. He lets out one little gasp and lets go of her completely. Tam pushes away from him, pulling out the knife. She's staring the man in the face. Behind me, I can hear the taller one crumble to the ground, dropping my sword. He was probably dead before he hit the ground. The other one, the shorter one, has both hands down covering the wound on his belly. That leaves the rest of him open and defenseless. I can tell from one look at his face he doesn't understand the situation. How could things change for him so dramatically, so quickly? He isn't used to his victims fighting back. Makes me wonder how he's managed to stay alive as long as he has. I can see just enough of Tam's face to watch as she fills with rage. She suddenly brings the knife up and slashes hard, catching the would-be thief and rapist across the throat. There's a mist of blood that sprays out, and she takes another step back. Tam watches as the criminal's eyes go wide, then hazy, then go blank. Blood curtains from the gash in his throat, and like his partner in crime, he's dead before he hits the dirt. Tam stands there staring, looking at the body in front of her, the blood pooling on the ground. She takes one step back to avoid the blood on the ground, more out of instinct than anything. Still staring, she drops the knife to the ground. Still standing, still staring. She's going into shock. I move slowly, carefully, quietly closing the gap between us, and I place a hand on her shoulder. She spins and pushes me away, wide-eyed. Then she breaks, and her expression softens from rage to despair, and she's suddenly hugging up against me, sobbing. I simply pull her close and try and comfort her. He, Tam manages between sobs. He was going to do it. They were actually going to kill us both. But first he would have... I know, I say soothingly. I know. I could feel it, Tam whispers against me. And we were not the first women they have, not the first girls. They have blood on their hands, so much blood, and that is why I killed him, not for myself, but for the others. I know, I say again. I don't ask how she knows all this. That's a conversation for another time. Well, I think I know how she knows, but I still need to hear her say it. Eventually she runs out of tears and pulls back from me a little. In a tiny voice she asks, "What do we do now?" I squeeze her shoulder one more time. Now we have to get the hell out of here. I immediately walk over to the small campfire and use utensils to begin to pull our meat off the fire. Having been ignored during the past few minutes, some of the meat is burnt and some undercooked, but right now we don't have enough food to start wasting it. Once the meat is off and wrapped, I begin to kick dirt over the fire. Here's the plan. You're going to gather up our supplies and get everything back onto our horses. I'm going to take these two and throw their bodies deep into the woods. With any luck, it'll be weeks before anyone stumbles into them, maybe longer. Either way, by that time, we'll be long gone. Tam looks at me, taking in my slight 5-foot-tall frame. I sigh. Trust me, I'm stronger than I look. I got this. You take care of the supplies. And true, it would be easier to move the two dead men if Tam helped, but the kid is shell-shocked enough as it is. I'm not going to compound that by having her drag and hide the bodies. 10 minutes later, I've managed to toss our two wankers out into the forest while getting only a small amount of blood on me. I also kicked dirt over the blood that pooled on the ground as best I could. A good rain will take care of the rest. Oh, and I retrieve and clean both of my throwing knives and my sword, and the thief's knife as well, even though it's pretty mediocre quality. Kind of like the meat I pulled from the fire, we don't have enough weapons to be picky at this point. It'll take a while to teach Tam how to use a sword, but she seems to already know how to wield a knife. We travel in silence until near dark, then find a quiet spot well hidden from the main road. Little more than a path through the woods, and I set a hasty campfire. Just enough for a little light and warmth. We need it after the day we've had. We're exhausted after the adrenaline and shock wears off, but neither of us is ready to sleep yet. I use a small metal basin of water and a cloth to rinse the little splatters of blood from Tam's face. Tam speaks for the first time in the past 2 hours, and her voice is small. "That was not your first time killing." She's asking, but it's worded as a statement, not a question. I shake my head. No, it's not. And then, even though I'm pretty sure I already know the answer, I need to ask. "You?" She gives one quiet nod and stares at the fire. She falls silent again. "We did what we had to do," I say. "You know that, right? They would have beaten us, raped us, killed us. You'd be lying dead in the woods if we hadn't. You said so yourself." She waves a hand, cutting me off. "I know all that. But still." She continues to stare at the fire as she speaks. "Once, 2 years back, we had a cart horse, Dunna, little more than a pony, really. Every day I fed and watered and brushed Dunna. I loved her dearly. Then she came up lame. We all knew there was no saving her. Every step was agony for her. But my father, he could not. So I took the hunting knife and I met Dunna in the field. I held her close and I looked her in the eye and I cut her throat. I watched as she died, and then I wept for days as I mourned Dunna." She fell silent for a moment and then added, "I do not mourn these 2 men. Men like that are more than just criminals. They are monsters on 2 legs. There are some men who deserve death. I am old enough to know that." I sigh and use a long stick to poke the fire. "So then, why didn't you just push him off you?" Tam looks up at me, face stricken. "What?" "Because you could have, right?" I say. "You could have just—" "Because it is forbidden!" Tam's voice echoes through the night, and she drops her voice lower. "It is forbidden! Or have you forgotten? Or perhaps you are a knight with no moral code. Perhaps you only do what is easiest, what is in your own interest, but I do not. The only way I have been able to control my curse these past several months is by not even attempting to touch the magic. Because magic is forbidden. It is cursed. It is prohibited. It is wayward." That statement pulls me up short, and I stare at her. "It is what?" "Magic is forbidden," Tam repeats. "I have said this to you many times, and still—" "No," I say. That last word. Wayward. Where did you hear that word?" Tam looks at me, her anger melting. After a moment, she sniffs away tears and gives me the tiniest grin. "Are you saying that I know a word that even the amazing Raven, a knight of Krell, does not know?" I chuckle and roll my eyes a little. "I've heard the word, kid. I've never heard it used that way. So what does it mean? To you, I mean. Used that way." Tam exhales and grows quiet for a moment. "Wayward is something that is more than just against the law, or forbidden, or not allowed. It is used to describe things that are so dangerous, so harmful to society, that it cannot be allowed ever, in any circumstance. It is forbidden beyond all things." Not trying to push too hard, but needing to make a point, I ask, "And killing someone, even in self-defense, is not wayward?" Tam scoffs. "You may take the life of another, only if your life is endangered, or to save the life of another. All know this. It is known." "So," I say quietly, "using magic, even if it's to keep from hurting someone further, is worse than killing someone?" Tam looks back at the fire as she says, "Using magic is one of the worst things a person can do." "What about the mind reading, then?" I ask. She looks at me and frowns, confused. "Back at the farm," I say, "you knew that the Emperor's guard was tracking you, that they suspected you of being able to use magic before I even said anything. Then, as we were traveling the other day, you were able to draw up the name of my order, the Krell, without me saying it out loud. And yeah, maybe you simply remembered it, but I don't think so. And then earlier tonight, you knew things about those two men that you had no business knowing. Things you said about their past, their intentions. And you also knew what I wanted you to do. You know, with the guy with the knife. I never said out loud that I wanted you to use magic on him, but you looked at me and said, I can't. Where I'm from, we call that reading minds. Tam gives her head a little shake. It is not reading. Rather, I feel things. I feel. And the feelings usually come unbidden. Usually, I can suppress them, but they sometimes leach through anyway. I do everything I can to stop the feelings, the same as I do everything to stop my ability to touch magic. Why? Tam looks up at me, blinking. What? I said, I'm asking why is magic forbidden? Why is it wayward? Why is using magic in self-defense to hurt somebody considered worse than using a weapon in self-defense to kill somebody? Tam stares at me in silence. I can see her mind working. She's not a dumb kid, far from it. She's simply been taught to never question authority. Because it is, she finally says weakly. Tam, I say quietly, who told you that magic is wayward? That one she can answer. All say it. All. The laws all say that magic is wayward. And who makes the rules, Tam? Who makes the laws? Who makes? The village makes the laws. So then, what? Everyone in the village sits around and votes on it? Tam frowns in confusion. What is votes? Yeah, that's what I thought. Does everyone get to decide what's law? I clarify. Or only certain someone's? Tam considers this and gets what I'm asking. I am not certain how it works for all villages or in the larger towns and cities. I do know that Culver, Two Forks, and Riverbend all have a village council that decides on laws. I simply assumed that all other villages did the same. And who sits on the council, Tam? Who? Are there any women on those councils, Tam? She frowns again. I do not know for certain. Living on a farm, but you know the people who live in the villages, right? Does it seem like women have an equal footing in the villages? What? Tam shakes her head. Are our feet equal? I do not understand what you are asking, nor do I understand why you are asking. I sigh and try a different approach. Let me ask you this. Back at the farm, your father wanted you to marry some guy, but you said no. Why? Was it the guy you didn't like, or was it the idea of getting married? Tam answers instantly. No need to think this one over. Liren, the innkeeper's son, is both boorish and boring. He is a meat sack with no brain. He is also more than 10 years my senior. But even if he was none of those things, I have no wish to marry, ever. I wish to be no man's property. Property? I ask, even though I understand completely. Village law, Tam explains, says that once a woman marries, she must listen to her husband in all things, unless he commands her to violate a law. But she has no real voice of her own. Is that how things are for your mother? Tam drops her eyes back to the fire. If mother ever does leave the farm, it will be in secret, in the dark of night, with only the clothes on her back. Father will simply wake up and she will be gone. I don't mention the fact that Tam said leave the farm and not leave her husband. I'm guessing that amicable divorce isn't a thing here. And why is that? Tam looks like she's explaining something to a simpleton. Because as a man's wife, she has no right to leave. She would have to violate the law to leave. So again, I say, you're saying that it's okay to break a law if, as I have said, Tam sighs, not all laws are seen as equal in weight. Is that not how it is where you are from? Okay, I say, trying another tact. Well, tell me this then. Does a society that treats married women as property sound like the kind of society that will allow women to help make the rules? Tam falls silent, considering this. What about weapons? I ask. In the village near your farm, are there laws restricting the use of weapons? Well, you cannot use them to harm or kill, unless in self-defense or in the defense of another. So you can use weapons to defend someone, but you can't use magic. Because magic is wayward. It is forbidden. Then why aren't weapons forbidden? Forbid weapons? Tam says it as if it's completely unthinkable. Because there are some people you must protect yourself from, as we have just seen. You yourself carry knives for that reason. Yes, I say quietly, and I was trained to use these knives, both in my own defense and in defense of the innocent. Exactly. A person can be trained to control a weapon, but magic is wild. It is uncontrollable. How do you know that? I ask gently. Tam opens her mouth, stops, closes it. Then she quietly says, "It is known. I'll say it. I already told you, Tam, I have seen women and girls controlling magic. It can be done. Yes, it can be dangerous, but a weapon used improperly or recklessly can also be incredibly dangerous. I can teach you how to use weapons, knives, swords, bows, staves, but I can't teach you how to use magic. But there are people who can. People who can teach you to control it." Tam fell silent, studying the fire again. I exhale quietly. Tam, did it never occur to you that magic, which is accessible almost exclusively to women and girls, is forbidden by your society, while weapons, which are used almost exclusively by men, are not? Tam's eyes flashed up at me for just a second, then back down to the fire. "You get that, right?" I say. "You understand what I'm saying. You notice how neither of those guys thought I was a real knight, even though I was wearing a sword. They'd never even heard of a woman using a weapon. It was unthinkable to them." "You lied to them, though," Tam said quietly. "You told them you were not a knight, but I know that you are." I give her a tiny grin. "Is that something you felt?" She gives her head a tiny shake. "I did not need to. You do not lie to me. You will not." She returns my tiny grin. "That part I did feel." She exhales quietly and looks away. "Also, I spoke in anger when I said you did not follow a moral code. I know that is not true. You would not kill a man who is not armed, correct? That is why you allowed him to steal your sword." "You're a very smart girl," I say, "very perceptive. So you know I'm telling you the truth when I say that there are people who can train you. They've trained other girls how to use magic, not just as weapons, but to heal and protect. Would you like that? Would you like to learn how to control your magic?" Tam sits quietly for a moment before standing up. "What I would like is to go to sleep. It has been a very long day, and I am suddenly very tired." I nod. "Okay, you go to sleep. I'll take the watch." This girl is still very stubborn in her way of thinking, but she is thinking, and that's a start.